Hey, Mike, I can't see clearly. Is that a lightning bolt on your shirt?
You're damn right it is, Oteil. This is Section 119. Hey guys, we just got our hands on some great new gear from an officially licensed partner of the Grateful Dead, Section 119.
Oh, yeah, Section 119. They sent me a pair of board shorts. They're actually really cool. I actually wore them on stage, and they were really comfortable. You know, I live in board shorts in Florida, so that's kind of my jam. And these have a cool print on them. Bertha's on there and the roses and stuff. I really like them.
I got one of the performance polos with the Grateful Dead bolt embroidered in the chest. It's super stretchy, and I love the way it feels when I'm on stage wearing it. I feel like I'm representing the Dead and rocking out some jokes in style.
Section 119 was started by a couple of fans who wanted more than a lot tee to show their appreciation for the Grateful Dead. They started an apparel line that has everything you can imagine to represent the band at every occasion.
And not just the Dead, they've got some amazing fish duds as well. From button-downs with dancing bears all over it, to board shorts with super vibrant prints and donuts all over your shirts and socks. They've got something for every fan, for any occasion.
If you're looking for more than a t-shirt to celebrate the Grateful Dead, the folks at Section 119 make the highest quality apparel.
Boogie on over to section119.com and use code COMESATIME. That's all one word, comes a time, for 15% off your next purchase.
Hey, this is Oteil. If you're liking what you're hearing, head on over to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get your bus pass for an extra episode every week.
It's another episode of Comes a Time. That's Oteil.
And that's Mike.
And we had Bela Fleck on the podcast today, and he's the coolest.
He is,
so
man.
Neat.
It's the first bluegrass album he's done in how many years did he say? 20 or something? It's a long time.
That, which, yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
And he ended up getting just an absolute summit of talent. Like just
like the Last Supper.
Yeah, I'm not even going to give it all away, but what a fun conversation, man. I forgot how easy he is to talk with, you know, and he's a really good spirit, man. I really like his spirit. Because humanity.
I kind of found this to be like a history lesson of sorts too. I got to know first of all, the way he describes panning like that, like, and the recording style, like, to me, I thought I knew what that meant, and I kind of guess that's what I thought. But his description of how it fits bluegrass recording is really neat.
Yeah,
you know?
And he kind of revolutionized bluegrass recording in a way too, by doing it wrong, or, you know, why do you do it like that?
he's a, and I get the chance to, and I won't ruin it, but I get the chance to thank him for sending me a sonic life raft when I needed it.
Having a bad trip at Bonnaroo.
I wish you could have seen me, Oteil. I was walking around going, how do I get home? I hate this. This is terrible. I'm going to die in a field in Tennessee. And then it was just like, bing, boom, ba-da-dum, ding, ding, ding. And I'm like, I just followed it. I'm like, where is it? Where is it? Acoustic music. And it was like just the palate cleanser. It was just a breath of fresh air. And it's, yeah, we've talked about it, how it all kind of going back to the basics sometimes. And it's just so beautiful. It was really great to talk with him. And I can't wait to talk with him again. This was one, that could have went 5 hours.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad he wants to come back.
We're happy to have him back. And we are sponsored by Garcia Handpicked Cannabis. If it's available in your area, ladies and gentlemen, we recommend going and sampling the goods. It's just like everything Jerry's ever done, quality. And the packaging's amazing. The insides of the packaging, the stuff that's in the packaging, amazing. And they spare no detail. So GarciaHandpick.com to find out if it's in your area. It's the best.
Go get you some.
And also we are on Osiris, home to so many great podcasts, osirispod.com for those. And Patreon. Go visit us at patreon.com/comesatimepod. Get your bus pass. We got a whole bunch of great content for you there. If you're out on the road seeing shows, please be safe. please be considerate to others. Please do the right thing and take care of each other out there, wherever you're listening to this, because we want you to stay healthy, and we want everybody to stay healthy. Be smart, people.
And be kind.
Yeah, in that order. I was the one in high school that would buy beer for everybody, and I was the youngest, but I had the quickest beard and it would grow thick. And now it grows in, I'd say, salt and pepper and what's red? Crushed red pepper. Oh. So it's a weird hodgepodgey mix. So from far away, my beard would grow red. When I had hair, it was like a dark brown, but my beard would grow red. And now when I grow one, it's just a complete mess. It just doesn't look like, see, yours is nice and fully
yours is
white.
Good.
I like that. Like that's like, at least it's consistent. I look like kind of it's falling off in places.
Right. Patch, yeah.
But it's not.
The last time I had a beard was like, I think when I was 19 years old, and I had a beard in the band that I was in, and there was a banjo newsletter cover story about me, and that I had the beard, but I cut it off because I started looking sort of Hasidic, and it just wasn't going to fly. I mean, I didn't really. I wanted to show off that I could grow a beard because I was at that age, I guess. But then once I cut it off, I never wanted to go there again until now. And then it was just more bored. You know, I just didn't want to shave. There was no point in shaving. No one was going to see me. And then Abby and I started doing our banjo shows, and it was like, hey, this is who I am right now. But it's different. Yeah, I definitely feel like it's turned me into like people actually knowing my age. Because before it could be a little bit, I don't know, maybe he's 50s, maybe he's 40s, but now I'm clearly in my 60s.
You do look young, man.
Yeah,
like if you were clean shaven, you're
right. So yeah, if I wanted to be clean shaven, but this is the truth. So the truth ought to be okay too.
Vulnerability is the.
Yeah.
I would be okay with the truth if it was all white.
Yeah, what would yours be? Have you done it?
Oh, it's not good. My wife is like, oh, no.
Do you grow it patchy, too? Do you have a patchy beard, or does it grow in like?
Yeah,
full?
I can't do a full thing, and it's like color-wise, it's patchy. Like if I could do that silver fox thing, man, oh yeah, I'd have the works, like full fro, mustache. My beard just does here, I could do that part, but it just.
Yeah.
I like that monkey tail idea. Where did you come up with that?
Some friends of Abby's, I think they were trying to make me look stupid. They said, you should do the monkey tail. That, like, all the ball players are doing that now. The baseball players are doing that. That's what you ought to do. And I did it, and everyone was like, well, wait. We thought it was going to be a joke, but it actually looked pretty good. I still haven't had the nerve to go back to it, but it was better than it ought to have been. I do have to say, I was always a fan of James Taylor, who, like, when he started losing his hair, he just took an album cover shot, which was just like completely honest. Like, here's my head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, instead of trying to like pretend you're younger or, whatever, thinner or all the things that we all do.
That was Colonel
Embrace
Bruce's.
the reality of who you are and life and.
Yeah. I'm dying to get to the point where I'm old enough to be okay to just let what will grow. It's just not. I'm not the body type for, like, I just would look so silly, and I'm just short and stocky, and with glasses it's hard, and all types. I mean, it would just be like a Halloween costume. If I started shaving I've been shaving my head now for God, I don't even know, 15 years or so, something like that. I lost my hair pretty young. I'm 41 now, but I started in my early 20s. But the minute I saw it going thin, I was like, that's it. I can't, I couldn't fake it,
You couldn't embrace the Sipowicz.
Yeah. My inner Sipowicz. Yeah, we were trying to figure out who I would look like if I grew it, but
what's the Sipowicz joke? I don't know what that means.
Do you remember, what was it, NYPD Blue or something?
NYPD Blue.
Dennis Franz. Remember that guy Sipowicz?
Oh, I loved him. Yeah,
I feel like if I grew it, that's kind of how we were talking. Like, there's a couple things I just can't wear. I can't wear a leather jacket. I can't wear like certain hats because it's just I look like a an undercover cop at like a Steely Dan concert or
Uh,
something. So
I can never pull off leather pants ever. I don't know anybody. I mean, some people seem to do it. I just never. I never do it.
Thank you
In
for.
fact, if I ever wear anything nice, it feels weird. Like I am supposed to be a slob. If I ever put something nice on, I go, well, what will people think of me if I show up looking like I don't, what am I trying to prove here by putting on something nice? Who am I, you know? So I buy things and they sit in my closet. Like I have that closet full of crazy clothes that I never will have the nerve to put on that I find on tour and they, oh, this will be great. I'll wear it with the Fleck tones, you know, it's wild. And I never, you know, then I put on
just
my black
sucks.
t-shirt and play the show, you know.
Yeah.
I feel.
You can even buy newer, nicer black T-shirts, and you still go back to the.
Yeah,
That's how I
Mine
am.
is always
exactly. Yeah.
either the Grammys or the funeral. It's like it's something, you know, something black tie or somebody died, and I feel so alien in a suit. People are like, oh,
Yeah.
you look nice, and I was like, I feel like this, you know. It's
Yeah. I
that's
think
where
if
we
you
were
wear
trying
them
to
all the
figure.
time, if you wear them all the time, you learn how to be comfortable in them. You know that the people that have to do that for whatever.
And tailor made too. Like
Oh
then
yeah.
it's like, oh,
I remember in a couple lifetimes ago of mine, before doing comedy for a living, I did sales, and we had to go and get our My First Men's Warehouse, you know, suit. And I just remember feeling so unbelievably uncomfortable. I'd be sitting across from someone trying to pitch some payroll solution or whatever to them, and I couldn't care less. And I feel it was one of those things like when you sit, the jacket would pull everything back, and then the tie would be like,
Right.
and I'm trying to keep
Yeah.
it cool, but I know my head's turning bright red and sweaty, and I'm just like, whoever thought that this was a proper business attire, like this, it's like two little baby hands choking you with a tie, and you got to wear a jacket, and it's just, I don't know, I'd never understood
Yeah.
that.
I really, I really feel like it was like clothing is all designed by men, and like a thin tie and long lines make fat men look thinner. But meanwhile, there's none of that kind of consideration for women and what they're expected to wear. So, in other words, the dress for a man tends to hide your figure, and the dress for women and not perfect, and you excoriated by, you know, people's what's the word, judgment. You know, it's not fair. And I mean, high heels, which, you know what I mean, all the things that they do to women with fashion that are not comfortable and only flattering to certain women with certain physiques that are, you know, 1 in 50. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's
But
totally
the
unfair.
guy thing, if you learn how to wear it, it actually could make you look a little less, you know, schlumpy or fat or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
that's my
I'm
theory.
with you. I'm always, just the most comfortable, the better. That's it.
Mhm.
So when you were like playing bluegrass, I think that's probably one of the reasons that I also shied away from jazz. You know, everybody's dressed up very nicely, which I think looks great on them. But like, what was it like on the bluegrass scene way back when? Could you just wear whatever the hell you want, or were they?
Um, it depended who you know what clan you were part of. Like Sam Bush and the Newgrass Revival, they wore, you know, t-shirts and jeans with holes in them, and well, I don't know if the jeans had holes in them. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't hipster jeans with holes in them. They actually
Yeah,
had holes in them, and the shirts were, you know, worn out um, but you know, when they felt like it, they put something nice on, and it might be pretty flamboyant. But when the bands that I were in were more sort of like trying to toe the line, so we always wore the nice sort of Western shirts or with snaps, which is idiotic for banjos because it tears up the back of your banjo. But we had band outfits with the same shirts, or you just wear a nice shirt and jeans, and that's pretty much what I've stuck
I
to.
really would love some pictures of all the things you've mentioned. You with the Hasidic look, you with the suit,
Yeah.
you with the Western shirts. You know, like
Like
we
baseball
got to
cards.
dig.
Bela Fleck baseball cards.
But what I loved about playing with Chick Corea is he was like he wasn't into any of that. Like he would wear you know what old guy sneakers
Oh
are?
yeah,
You know, they're like gray. They're like geriatric sneakers, and he would wear, you know, whatever he felt like. He was just like not. he was so casual about it, and he wasn't going to like make the performance. It was just part of his day. Like, oh, okay, we're going to go on stage. I once in a while would overdress, like with some nice shirt, or like really try to look good for the gig with it, something, and um, it didn't seem to work. So I went back to the black T-shirt, because he was just not worried about that.
That's the
He
great.
always looked good,
Yeah.
but he looked good like a normal person.
And then you look at Future Man,
Yeah, right. I
straight out
think
of
it's
Hamilton.
before Hamilton was Hamilton.
Before
Yeah, he was long before
that
that.
blew
Yeah, and
my
that's
mind.
his script. Yeah, all of those brothers. He's the one that has that fashion style and that way of doing things. Everyone else has different ones. All of the other, well, you know better than me, Oteil, but he's always had that flair and that visualization of an image that he thinks about, and it's neat.
Yeah, I think when they were kids, they had that superhero kind of alter ego. It's like the it's like Sipowicz. The original idea for that was like, with Andy Kaufman, and then he had that character Tony Clifton that people didn't even know was him at first.
Right.
Just like total alter ego. So that's what we were going for with Sipowicz, like as a comedian, just have this complete separate character. And that's kind of like Future Man. He just like is the character, like he's merged his superhero with his Earth self, It's like Bootsy or something. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
Bootsy. Yeah.
right. Right, like Bootsy, yeah. Bootsy's that exact same thing. And I then like Prince was, Prince would walk in a room and it was a thing. I mean, I have to say, a guy like Bill Monroe was the same way. He carried himself, he dressed a certain way, he showed up. When he walked in the room, you noticed. It was like, oh my gosh. And I guess, but Earl Scruggs wasn't really like that. He wasn't really like that. He was more of a regular guy. So you ended up talking a lot more about Bill Monroe than you talked about Earl Scruggs, in the bluegrass world. Because there was so much drama all the time. He said this, he did this. It's crazy. On good behavior is not rewarded in show business.
No, not very true.
Bluegrass is no exception.
No.
And it almost seems interesting too with a lot of like the shiny Western type, like the shiny boots and the big belt buckles, and like you were saying, the buttons. It seemed
Jimmy
like
Martin.
that was like the real flair was the buttons and like the bit, but the shiny boots with like the intricate detail and all of that. Like you look at some of those old pictures and it's like, man, that's some pretty fascinating stuff. I don't know how comfortable, but
Now our pictures have shifted. It's funny. It doesn't matter though.
that's awesome though.
We just went. Whoop.
People are gonna go, wait, what? Somebody blinked. And...
So yeah, for those of you that wonder why our pictures shifted, we just had a little technical difficulty. But yeah, Bale, I was wondering, since you brought up the dressing and the Western shirts and stuff, what was it like coming from New York and then being all of a sudden in that hardcore, like Bill Monroe? Because the bluegrass scene that I got into was already post newgrass, so it was like half hippie before I went all the way in. But you went in, there was, what was that like?
Well, you interviewed Tony Trischka, and he did some of the heavy lifting before I got on the scene. And I remember, there's a magazine called Bluegrass Unlimited, but they really should have called it Bluegrass Limited at the time, because all people ever did in that magazine was grouse about people that were, expanding the music, like Tony. And it was pretty rare you could open the magazine to the letters and not see somebody just freaking out about how bluegrass was being destroyed by people like Special, Tony Trischka, Andy Statman, etc. And
so good.
So when I came into it, so he took a lot of hits, and I really, and he couldn't have been a better musician and a better person, and couldn't have loved the music more. But he just has always just had such a good attitude about all of that. And when you're the first person, you don't always get treated as fairly. So by the time I came along, there had already been a Tony Trischka. There was a Newgrass Revival. I joined the Newgrass Revival after it had been around for maybe 7 years.
Wow, that long?
8 years, yeah. It was a band before me with a great legacy, a great band. and they were playing with Leon Russell, and two of the guys got really tired of it, didn't want to do that anymore, didn't want to be part of it, because it started out they were going to be the do an opening slot and then play a few songs in the band, but eventually Leon liked them so much he made them his band, and they lost the opening slot, and pretty soon they weren't doing their own music anymore, and two of the guys were like, we got to go, we don't, this is not what we're here for, and but they wanted to drop out of the dates that were booked, and Sam and John didn't want to do that, so they left, and they left John and Sam with Leon, and they went on and finished the dates, and then Sam and John also wanted to go back to being Newgrass and decided to restart the band with new people, and that's when they got me in 1981.
Wow.
And but they had already, there's a lot of people had already been out there turning bluegrass upside down before I came around. I was just another. Tony Rice is a good example, Sam Bush, David Grisman, and there's a whole New York contingent, this Breakfast Special bunch that Andy Statman and Tony.
He's great.
They had this crazy. In fact, they were the most progressive of anybody, and they got the least real appreciation and success in the business. But they were the most, the wildest, craziest, most amazing group on the scene. But and then they broke up, and that was over. And but I actually, I started out in a Boston band out of high school called Tasty Licks, unfortunately. And when that split up, I was watching what was going on with Tony, and I was like, I don't know, I don't want to be, everybody mad at me, and plus I wanted to figure out how to play with the cats, like the Southern cat, like Tony Rice and guys like and Sam Bush. I wanted to play with those guys, and there didn't seem to be a progressive banjo player in that world, the same way those guys were. Like for instance, J.D. Crow's band with Tony Rice and Jerry Douglas in it. He played straight, and the other guys played more modern. Ricky Skaggs. Yeah. They all played more fancy stuff, but he was always the straight player. I thought, well, I'd like to be in that band playing the way I play and with the way they're playing, the other guys are playing. And when Tony Rice went out west and started playing with Grisman, there was no banjo in the band. I said, well, I want to play with those guys. I want to play with those guys, So I thought I should go down south and really learn the straight stuff, and it would be a great thing. And I got an opportunity to move to Kentucky with Mark Schatz. We joined a band down there. And that's where, the Snap Shirts came in a bit. And that's when I got to really be on the bluegrass scene for a couple of years in a band that we were on the fringes. It was called Spectrum. And we did some stuff that wasn't straight ahead, but it was guys that had all played with J.D. Crow and been in his band. So I was getting some of the lineage. And just living in that town, I went to see him play, played at the Holiday Inn on Newtown Pike, like he'd play for a month at a time. And if I was in town, I'd be there every night watching him and figuring out, because there's an egotism to like, well, Tony Trishka's my guy. Like I learned from him, and nobody can play like him, and nobody could. But it was this modern, newfangled stuff. And what was the thing? Why was Crow so good? When I first got there, it was like I love this, but I don't know why he's not doing that much. Yeah. And finally, it dawned on me how much he was actually doing, and it became a part of me. It made me a better musician, a solider musician. Than maybe a lot of the New York guys were better about ideas, but they didn't have that Southern timing and that Southern tone. They didn't have the old banjos and the old instruments. They didn't have the ethos that the Southern guys had. So I wanted to be a Northern guy that could be with the Southern guys and the Northern guys, and do it all. That was my goal. And I started really studying the Earl Scruggs stuff, all the live radio shows, and studying Crow and the cats that had the rhythm.
Yeah,
Wow.
that timing. That they always, it's the timing, man. And it's
Right.
they're right. It's a thing. It's a language.
Well,
It is.
and in talking about this in 2021, like there was no social media, there was no cell phones, there was no so in connecting with, coming from the Northeast and connecting with folks down south, was it all via magazine? Was it all via the letters back and forth, getting to know someone, kind of following up? It's not as easy to connect back then.
Right. Well, I remember we were in this band, Tasty Licks, me and Mark, and we were playing in Knoxville, and we heard about these guys up in Lexington that were, interested in forming a band, and we just got in a car and found them and played with them, and we ended up starting the band with them.
That's great.
But it was like cassettes, just like, you remember, trading cassettes. Oh, I'll make you a dub of this Flat and Scruggs, live show that nobody has, or there's radio shows they used to do at 5 in the morning, and you'd hear Earl play, and they would do, they'd get up every morning and do these radio shows, and then go drive and play gigs somewhere in the South, and then get back in time to play another one, and they were tired, but they were playing all the time. And so the spontaneous stuff was coming out of Earl Scruggs, and a lot of times those radio shows really sounded great. It was some tiny little studio, they're all gathered around one mic, and the banjo was just unbelievable. So I just really started getting what was so amazing about Earl. But he wasn't on the scene when I was in. He kind of disappeared. I think he was not feeling that well, and I didn't get to meet him for quite a long time until I had moved to Nashville, and I'd been there for several years. And then John Hartford introduced me to him, brought me to his house. Wow. And in the end, we got to be very good friends. He lived about 2 miles from me, and I'd go see him whenever I came home, and it all turned out, like a dream. Really. With Chick Corea, like them being my two top most favorite musicians, and then
awesome.
getting to have a mentor kind of warm grandson kind of vibe with them.
That's so awesome. Important. We talk about that a bunch, just the ability to have a mentor and to realize it while you have it, and not go, I wish I took advantage of that when it was there, but like to be open and available to the lessons at that time is so important.
It is. And I notice you can tell when you've got a mentor, because when you're with your peers and you got a lot of ideas, you're in a hurry to say what you think should happen. But when Chick Corea says, I think we should do this, this, and this, go, yep.
Yeah.
There's no bone in your body that wants to shout out your idea. You're like, amen. Same thing with Zakir Hussein when I get to play with him. If he has an idea, I'm like, yes.
Oh,
Let's do it. Whatever you think.
That's so great.
I would be too scared to play with Zakir Hussein. I got the chance to play with Elvin, and I was like, I'm not ready yet, I kind of wish I had done it. But it was just
man.
I felt not worthy,
I know. Well, I feel that way still about all my years with playing with Chick. As much as we got to do, I couldn't do what he could do, but it was just an opportunity for it to rub off on me. You can only get better by being associated with people that are better than you, and where they really are better than you is, a matter of perspective. But Chick, it's not. It's just fact. But you know what I mean. You being with him, you would have just had an incredible growth experience, and you would have been great.
Yeah. Well, what I've realized a lot now that I'm older is how open those cats were. They were like, because they were welcoming. Like, sure, come on up and play. It's not going to compare me to Jimmy Garrison or whoever. It's like, this is us right now in this little hotel lobby at Montreux Jazz Festival. I just was like, I was in my early 20s. I was just scared. I'm a drummer, so he's literally my biggest musical hero.
Wow.
Because I was a drummer long before.
Well, he was just such a badass, cool dude. Like he probably wouldn't have to say anything; he'd be just completely intimidated. But I don't think he meant any harm.
No, and I hung out with Elvin, I think, 2 or 3 times, and wow, how gracious! It's so great because I'm sure you've had this, Bela, where you meet some heroes and it's just such a letdown, and it's not their fault because they're humans. And, I put them up on that pedestal, But when you do meet, like, Elvin Jones, Roy Haynes, all the Meters guys, Zig Modalesi, when you meet your heroes and they're just like angel race, gracious, truly humble somehow, unbelievably, it's just life-changing, So I did get that with Elvin, at least. I just didn't get to play with him.
That's something.
Yeah. So you're doing your first bluegrass album in a long time?
I was just going to say that people are kind of used to themselves and a little tired of themselves is what I experience. And they're happy if you can be somebody new that brings them out of themselves into something new. Yeah. Maybe they discover something new about themselves. Like if I play with somebody and I go, I'm playing different stuff. I really like that person. I'm not necessarily checking out 100% focused on how they're playing yet. My first thing is, what is this doing to me? And it's a selfish natural thing that happens with you. You can't help it, or I can't help it. It's like, some stimulation is happening. I'm not doing my regular thing, and it's a wonderful feeling, and I always love that. and then it makes me take real notice in who they are and what they are. Usually after that, can I do my thing with them first of all, or can they make me do something I would never normally do? That's what a great collaboration should do. Should bring something out of you that you can't come up with on your own. But
That's
yeah,
what
bluegrass.
Well, I was going to say that's what playing with Colonel Bruce did for me, because I never played with bluegrass musicians, or it took me so out of my element.
Yeah,
And I had that same thing, like, can what I do fit with this? Like, where does it, there's some way that all fits together.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it's going to change me, but also there's a part where I don't have to change, where they like meet and then we influence each other.
right.
And that was really the first time that I've broke through those kind of barriers, like taking myself out of my element. And
Well, you've always seemed incredibly open to me and very responsive to everything that's happening around you, and that's so I also have learned that the more tunnel vision and what's the word, judgmental I am, and the more elitist I am, the more I lose. The less opportunity I have to love something or learn something I didn't know.
One of the fun parts of being a listener and a fan of both bluegrass and jam music, and how open and vulnerable it is that everyone gets their turn. And that's fun to watch, because it's like you could trust that. You could trust the band. I have a lot of faith in my bands, because I know they have faith in each other, and they show it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not really into the going to see a band where 80% of them are behind the leader that's up there shredding and pointing and flames are shooting. Like, I'd rather see got black t-shirts and sweatpants and everybody's taking their turn and they're enjoying what the people that, like, you're getting turned on in the moment and you're like, oh wow, I gotta follow that, like, go. I love that about bluegrass, and I think that's one of the things that always kind of grabbed me about it right off the bat. Like, even early, like Nashville Skyline Rag and stuff like that, where it's just all kind of like in the round there, and it's like that's really fun to experience as a fan. It's always keeping you on your toes, and it's always keeping you, like, rooting for you guys. You know what I mean? Thanks for listening. We'll be right back after this. What's up, everyone? I'm Mike.
And I'm Oteil.
And these are our Sunset Lake CBD gummies that are almost gone. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned business that ships CBD products directly from their farm to your door.
For years, Sunset Lake was a Vermont dairy farm producing milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. In 2018, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD.
And with a product for everyone, they offer pre-rolls, hemp cigars, and hemp flowers, as well as tinctures, gummies, and CBD crafted coffee to help with stress, aches, and pains.
Sunset Lake CBD saves you money by shipping high-quality CBD products directly from their farm to your door.
Want to know what I've been using a lot of, Oteil? This salve with the arnica on my old bones. You get back from a show and you got tore ankle, rub a little bit of this on there, you're ready to dance the next day. And Sunset Lake comes a time listeners can visit sunsetlakecbd.com and use promo code TIME for 20% off of their purchase. That's sunsetlakecbd.com, promo code TIME. And tell them we sent you.
Thanks for listening.
Well, it's a team sport, and there's some competition in it, and hopefully friendly competition. Yeah. But I think, I don't know, I think I would say the same thing about any great band. You want to see everybody really supporting each other,
right,
at all times. And when somebody does something good, you want everybody to be happy, And so I think it's like a great basketball team, that, some people are really good at defense. I mean, I think good music can be made up any possible way. It can be only one soloist and everyone else is in support, or it can be all equal on the front line. It's there's no rule. It can be whatever it is. And if somebody is just a phenomenal support player and that's what's needed in the band and they're happy, and think about like the bass player in Mahavishnu. He didn't get a lot of but that band wouldn't have been together without him.
I guess you're right. Yeah.
He just passed away.
Yeah, I know. That's why it came to my mind. But I was talking to Mark
Dang.
Schatz years ago, and it said, and he sometimes he's like frustrated. He's like, "I'm not good enough. You should play with better people." And I'd say, "I need somebody to jerk on so I can jerk off." You know? I'm here to jerk on. And he plays. He's a great player. He's this great support player, and he provides a bed. Sorry, I took it there,
Yeah.
but he provides a bed that's really comfortable, and I can do my thing. And he's a great dude, and he's supportive in every way, and he's willing to do anything he can do for the band and the music, whatever he's doing. He's a good dude. People want to play with him. So there's no rule, but I do love that blue. And when I do my music with bluegrass, I always end up making it pretty darn equal. Once in a while, someone will say, "Hey, it's a banjo record. Why don't you take two solos?" People want to hear you. It's your tune. It's like, well, I'm going to play the melody at the beginning. I'm going to play the melody at the end. But so I'm always a little resistant, but sometimes I do. But this new album is pretty darn. Everybody's probably featured just as much as me. It's just a lot of different people. I'm on every track, but most other people are on several tracks, and it's a double album. So
Oh,
there's a
cool.
lot of people and
Nice.
a lot of a lot of great playing.
So you say double album, that makes me think it's actual vinyl.
It will be, yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be final too, but it's 19 songs and of various lengths, and
Wow.
yeah, it started out with really wanting to get back. I made two real bluegrass records in my life of my own, and some people would say they're not really bluegrass, but banjo albums with a bluegrass group. With
Yeah.
bluegrass as a hearty component of the music. So one was called Drive, and one was called Bluegrass Sessions, and they were with the same band with Tony Rice and Sam Bush and Jerry Douglas and Stuart Duncan and Mark Schatz,
Oh,
and
mm,
I think that's everybody. And other people who played
jeez.
less, like Mark O'Connor was on
Yeah.
one, and Vassar was on the other as guests, and Earl was on the last one. But it was like I made Drive, and then it was 10 years later I made Bluegrass Sessions after Flecktones had happened, and I wanted to get back, and then we toured that one, and it was great. And then 20 years went by when I couldn't do it, and part of it was that Tony Rice was really not responsive. He was having a lot of trouble
Yeah.
playing, and I couldn't imagine doing a record like this without all of those guys. And at a certain point, it just wasn't going to be possible, and I was going to have to, either never. And I had all these tunes that were like withering on the vine. How you've got tunes, and you were attached to them for a while, and you never got to do anything with them, and they're just sort of withering. And I'm like, all these tunes that I've written that over the last 20 years, and thinking about that band, and they're never going to get done, and I'm going to forget about them, and they'll just be gone.
Mm.
Yeah.
Start thinking about that kind of stuff, as you're getting older and stuff. But so I just started thinking about it, and then we had this episode with our son, who's now 3 years old and very 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 healthy, but we almost lost him to
Really?
a hereditary liver disease that we didn't know he had, and he
Oh my
Whoa.
God.
almost bled out, and so for some reason in the aftermath of all of that, I found myself like desperately needing to do a bluegrass record. And
Huh.
I don't know if it's the community. I can't explain why it was so compelling. I mean, it wasn't like while we were still in the middle of the recuperation, although
Yeah.
recuperation has taken a couple of years for us to get over it, but maybe we'll never be over it. But
Yeah.
he's good. He's really good. But
Wow.
at any
Thank
rate,
God.
for some reason, it was connected to this whole event, and I'm not
Interesting.
going anywhere. I'm not going touring. I'm going to be here for a while and reducing everything. But it wasn't that. It was that sense of things undone.
Yeah.
Or I can't quite explain it. But at any rate, so I started throwing around ideas, and I thought, well, I can't get Tony, so maybe I'll try playing with a whole new bunch of guys. And I found a whole new bunch of guys: Michael Cleveland and Cody Kilby and Paul Coert and um, uh, and did I say Michael Cleveland, the
Yeah.
blind fiddle player? Is
These are
amazing.
all names I don't know. I'm like,
Oh
yes. It's like
yeah,
a pantry full
uh,
of new food.
Fresh blood.
Yeah.
yeah, Fresh Blood, right? Dominic Leslie, who's like this great mandolin player, young guy, and who I thought had a lot of real moxie, and so I
Nice.
got them over for a jam at my house, where when they all showed up, I had all of these charts and threw all this music at them, and it sounded great. I was like, wow, okay, this is what I'll do. I'll do this. And so I plan to record maybe 4 or 5 tracks with those guys to start, see, because they were local. I could get them to come over, and they weren't, crazy busy. And then after a little while, I started having buyer's remorse, and I started thinking, well, why aren't I recording with Sam and Jerry and Stuart just because Tony's not there,
Yeah.
and Mark and Edgar, and
Yeah.
and so I I was talking to Abby, and she said, "Well, why don't you do both on the record?" And I was saying, "Well, you don't understand, honey. I make records with a band. That's what I do. And when I do all the diversity of the music, because it's the same players, it makes it cohesive, and that's my thing." And she said, "Oh, okay." And then I went and thought about it, and of course I was like,
I'm
"Well,
sorry, you were
pretty
right.
good idea. You're right, as always." And so once I opened up Pandora's box, I was like, "Okay, well, I'll do these two bands." And then was like, well, why don't I have, I love Chris Thiele and we're very friendly, and how could I do a new record? Why don't I do something with him? And then around that time I met Billy Strings, and he was really eager to come over and jam. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be fun? Billy and Chris together, because that would spark them both. They'd never really
Oh
even
God.
met. And so, and then Chris said, well, why don't you try Billy Contreras? And I thought, well, if Chris likes the idea, it'll be much more on the edge. And so we did a few tracks with those guys. And then David Grisman was playing duet shows with Del McCoury, and he was going to be. I said, "Hey, if you're around, why don't you come by?" And he did a couple of days, or I guess a day of tracks. And pretty soon it was like, "Oh, Tony, why don't you, we've never done anything on one of my records." Tony Fishka came down and Nome, and we did a three banjo thing. And then Abby,
Jesus.
on my shoulder again. Bela, no girls, there are girls, and I was like, dang, you're right. And so then I went back and put together another band with Sierra Hull and Molly Tuttle, who are fabulous musicians
Yeah.
and just as good as anybody else. And I don't know why, my unconscious male bias, I was just going for the guys that I had been thinking about and wanted to play with and hadn't even thought about it. And I'm really glad I did, because we made some great tracks, and Sierra's in the touring band, and she's just blowing my mind. So that it ended up just growing and growing and growing.
Phenomenal.
I couldn't stop, and it all kind of came to a close. I think in January, the last sessions were like early January, I believe, right before the pandemic hit. And then I was sitting with all of these, tapes. Nobody overdubbed or anything. We would do a song for 3 hours and go do another song, and then I would pick up the pieces after everybody left. And so I had a year and a half to do the picking up of the pieces and editing finding the best stuff and coming to determinations and mixing it all myself and everything.
Wow.
And here it is.
Damn, that's beautiful.
It's like a summit, man. I can't wait to hear this thing now.
Yeah, so I think there's 19 people on it, and so it's a real community record, and I've never done a community record before. So and then we did our first gig here at Rocky Grass last weekend, and I had put together. You see, the nice thing about having this many people on the record is when I go tour, I don't have key people that if I can't get them, I can't do it. There's a pile of people I can put together great bands from that are all on the record. And they have to learn all the music, which was quite a task. So the first band was Brian Sutton on guitar and Michael Cleveland, this incredible fiddle player, and Sierra playing mandolin, and her husband, Justin, he plays everything. He played double banjo with me on one song. He played double mandolin with Sierra. He does double fiddles with Michael. He plays dobro like Jerry Douglas, except nobody can play like Jerry Douglas. And he sings. He's got a real bluegrass voice. So he's covering all of the events that I had on the record where I had different people play together, and we can pull it all off live. And we did all the music, and it was intense and really fun.
Is it just me, or does it seem like it's more common in bluegrass that the musicians tend to be able to play anything with strings? Like, it just seems like there's more musicians that were good at really, really good at multiple instruments.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I think there are people like that. Just like in jazz, you've got a guy who's like an incredible pianist. Like you've got Jason Marsalis, who plays the vibes like crazy and drums like a fiend and whistles, but I think there's more of a tendency for everybody in bluegrass to play the guitar, but a mandolin player isn't necessarily going to play the fiddle. But Stuart Duncan plays fiddle and mandolin really great, and Michael Cleveland plays mandolin really great. They're known as fiddle players. But I don't play anything. I don't play dobro, or you would think that would be a pretty natural with the picks the same.
Yeah. But you're from New York.
Yeah. Even look at Garcia. I think Jerry was a banjo player before he was a guitar.
And
Billy
pedal steel.
Yeah.
Pedal steel, right? Yeah. When I first was learning from Tony Trishka and stuff like that, I loved all the guys on the record so much. I remember getting a fiddle and learning the fiddle solos. It sounded terrible, and getting the mandolin and trying to learn Andy's solos and the guitar and figuring it. But at a certain point, it became clear to me that if I really wanted to be good on the banjo, I needed to really play the banjo. There was a little pedal steel infatuation there too, and it was just going to be so time consuming. I couldn't see how I could get to where I was trying to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got there.
I remember the very first Bonnaroo, going way too heavy with the drugs, way too fast, and walking around, and I was overwhelmed, entirely overwhelmed. And I heard you and Edgar, and I followed the music over the hills and through, the crowds and passed out people and all of that. And you guys were like a life raft to me.
Oh,
It was so crisp and so clean and so refreshing that it literally took me out of a horrible mind state and just put me into a great place, like a comforting place. And I was sitting right there watching you guys like you're angels. You guys were sent to save me. And it was just the most unbelievable experience. And I could still see it to this day.
I remember.
And it was just,
I remember that
That was
it
an
rained, like partway through the set, the rain hit, and the rain poured in. They were so unprepared that first year. There was like a little plastic covering to the monitor board, and it just, when the rain hit it, it just started to, and it just poured directly into the monitor board, and the monitor board just went, and it was dead, and we had nothing, and the audience had not, and so we ended up, I think if I remember right, maybe there were some front fills, and we turned one of the front fills towards us a little bit so we could hear ourselves a little bit.
yeah.
And when it rained, everybody cheered as if we had brought the rain because
Oh,
it was so
it
hot.
was,
Everybody was like, "Yeah, Bela and Edgar, yeah!"
they brought the rain, man. It washed my bad trip away, I'll tell you that much.
Well, that's
But
good.
that year it was like it went from 500 degrees to like
Yeah.
that you could see the steam just rising off
Yeah.
people's shoulders and
Yeah.
burnt heads and all of that. But I've and I had seen you before then, but that one is it's like branded on my memory as one of the most like trust fall. Like I talk about having like the ability to trust fall into music. And that was one of those moments that was just like, this is just exactly what I needed at the exact same time that I needed it. And I always loved that. Like I remember Del McCrory Band playing at a fish festival, and it's just, bluegrass is just such
I
a
love
beautiful, like, I don't want to say a palate cleanser. It's so different, but it's so, it's in the raw fundamentals of everything that we're listening to. And that's the thing that's
acoustic part of
yeah,
it.
and I feel the
know?
same way about jazz, where it's like you can put it anywhere at any time and it's welcome, and that's just the two, I guess, most American of musics, right? Bluegrass.
Yeah. When I
think
started,
that stamps you as a certain kind of listener, because for some people, bluegrass is repellent, and banjos are repellent, and for other people, it's soothing, and
and jazz too.
Jazz,
Well,
same thing. Yeah, time to go talk.
Both of
Time
those
to talk to
musics,
your friends, not listen. Once the jazz beat comes.
Yeah. See, to me, those are two types of music where if I close my eyes, it sounds like there's a symphony up there, but really it's the two of you. It's just all 10 fingers are working. Do you know what I mean? And it's like when you go see a jazz band and it's like it could be a very minimalist part of a song even. It just sounds like there's more going on, and then you open your eyes and it's just like a couple of people. And that to me was always so fascinating about bluegrass, was that like the amount of sound coming out of one instrument.
For sure, but I mean, when you get to the kind of great players, or someone like O'Teal, for instance, I mean, I learned this from Edgar. Like, more is not always more. It's a very obvious thing, but like when you have busy players with a lot of ideas going on, and you get just a couple of them, it's a full sound. And if you think carefully about the sonic contribution of each instrument, and you have a low instrument and a higher instrument, like the banjo and the bass, for instance, any other low instrument is going to get in the way of the bass, and any other higher instrument is going to get in the way of the banjo, and the dialogue is going to have to make room for that. So with just the bass and the banjo, it was a very full palette, and you could turn it up, and it would feel like you were hearing, you're hearing all the way from the top to the bottom. There's all this stuff going on, where you could have 10 people playing all in the same range, and it would only be this much stuff you would actually hear. So good jazz players, because they're not like banging chords consecutively, all of this, they're playing separate lines that interlock and flow, even though they're spontaneous, like Bach or something. You can hear all the lines separately, and it can be a very full sound with very very few people, or very few lines. So it's more about our orchestration and being natural at doing that. Now the weird thing about this is bluegrass is the opposite. Bluegrass is the worst thing because in terms of orchestration, because everyone's in the same range. You've got guitar, mandolin, banjo, dobro, fiddle, all sharing the same frequencies, and so a lot of times it's very hard to mix it properly. And like for me, I've learned panning on a record really helps. But like jazz used to be, when the guy would walk up to the microphone, he was a lot louder. Bluegrass used to be like that when people play on one mic, and you see Del McCoury, you get to get a taste of that. Whoever comes up front is really dominant, and everyone follows them, and the next person comes up and does it, and there's this real dance, and you can really hear the front person. But now that most people mic all the bluegrass instruments separately, and or they have pickups, or it's all so present, then all the frequencies fight, and there's no opportunity for everybody to get quieter and make room for the leader. So it's really a problem of technology actually making it worse in general. So, well, with my bluegrass group, my idea is that no pickups. Use the ears so we can use really nice mics and turn them up, and then stay off of them. When you come up front and it's your time, everyone's going to hear you get louder, and you're going to follow their lead like you did when it was on one mic. But you're really going to hear each other, and it worked pretty well at the first gig so far. So I think it's going to work out. We'll have that acoustic aesthetic, and we'll have dynamics. A lot of times when I play with the top bluegrass guys, but we all have pickups, it's just this huge muckety sound, and it's like we're not helping each other. We're not helping ourselves get a great sound out to the people or hear each other well. So I have a lot of opinions, obviously.
We fixed something that wasn't broke.
Right. Updating the software again, right?
Yeah. Oh God.
Right.
When I started playing banjo, it was because of my wife, and then first year we were married, she moved to Africa, and I picked up her banjo, and there's a whole connection to throw down your heart with this that I'm getting to, but we lived in Lawrenceville, Georgia, next to a Black Angus cow farm, and I was out there just depressed because my wife was gone for a whole year, and I'm learning banjo, and I started to get my rolls together, and all of a sudden this huge grin just came over my face, and I'm looking at the cows, and a little voice said to me, "You're picking and grinning right now." And I was just like, oh shit. That's why they say that, like all cliches are true. And I was like, I texted my wife, it's true. That's why they say it, But, when I was studying, Reverend Mosier had said to me a long time ago, you should be playing banjo. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, black people. And I was like, what? And he said, it's because it comes from Africa. And I was like, oh, all right. So then all these years later, 20 some years later, when I actually dug into it, I called him and he told me about Throw Down Your Heart. And one of the places you were in was Tanzania, right? In Africa? Yeah. So can you explain to people what that is? Because I was in Tanzania with her banjo playing, and I was like, oh my God, it was so cathartic. Because I was like, here I'm at one of the homes of banjo playing. So can you tell people about that might not know?
Did you go to Bagamoyo?
No, actually, it was Lake Tanganyika or something. I was actually wasn't in Tanzania, but I was looking across this body of water at Tanzania. It was like right there, like I could have swam to it, I think.
Were you in Kenya or Zanzibar? No.
Uganda.
Uganda. You were in Uganda. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, the banjo doesn't come from that part of Africa. It comes from West Africa, but I went there because I had some access and some musicians I was really interested in. And when I got there, I found out all these things. There's a town called Bagamoyo. I think that's kind of how they say it. Yeah. And what it means is throw down your heart, basically, more or less. And that was the, we're all very aware of the West African slave ports where people were, put on the ships and sent west. But a lot of people, including myself, have no idea how huge the Eastern African slave trade was. In fact, quite a bit bigger. Yeah. And longer, and slaves going to the Arab states, and Arab countries or territories or whatever they were back then, and so the story was that when people were enslaved and brought to the ocean and they saw the ships in Bagamoyo, they would throw down their heart because they would never see their home again. they realized they would never see their home again. That was the story that was told to me by some local musicians there.
Wow.
It's heavy. It's heavy, and the banjo being so, you know, entwined in that story. That's why it struck me as a perfect bittersweet title, because people, I like title where you think about it and maybe you don't quite know what it is, and you have your own perception, because it's enough to throw down your heart and fall in love with an instrument. You sitting there with the cows threw down your heart because you got to experience what it's like to have a banjo in your hand sounding good, and you making the sound. It's like the sound is coming up at you. It's like a little piano in your lap, and it's a real joyful thing. And so it could even be as simple as that, but it isn't. It's much more complicated than that, and we can handle complexity. We're human beings. We can. Everything doesn't have to be simplified for us. It can be all of these things. But I like that name because it really respected what had happened and why the banjo was an American instrument, through slavery, and what it meant for human beings.
Who were we talking to, Oteil? Was it Tony that had it, like the back of the actual body of the banjo was almost like a gourd?
Yeah, that was Tony. Yeah, because a lot of those banjos, the Carolina Chocolate Drops, Rhiannon is the first time I actually got to hold one. Like, you have to hit it with a hair dryer so the head tightens.
Really?
It tightens up, and it was fretless and lower.
Yeah.
And man, that sound really did, like, my grandfather on my mom's side comes from Durham, North Carolina, where a lot of those black banjo players are from. So it literally was in my DNA, like, calling me. Because when I heard that, Bela, I didn't want to play with a pick at first because, I've been playing with my fingers forever. So I was like, well, I'll just do claw hammer or maybe my own bastardized whatever I come up with. And I was sitting there watching TV one day, and Jess is gone. I'm depressed, and all her finger picks were sitting on the coffee table. And I just picked one up and put it on this finger, and I just went ding, and it was like, oh my God.
It's so different.
Yeah, I was like, whatever. I don't even care. I just put them on. It's like the dog walking with shoes on at first.
It is.
But, it was so alien and foreign, just horrible. But that sound, and that's what I was saying before, it just retuned like my spirit. Like, I think that's what was calling to you at Bonnaroo. It's something about acoustic music, like, and it really messed me up going back and playing with the Allman Brothers, because everything's so loud and just like, it just felt like you would just turn the volume up to this and it would just stay there.
Right.
And I would get back home and I'd just be like, and it would just piece me out. So it really, it was a super cathartic thing. And then when I found Throw Down Your Heart, I tried to jam, because now I committed to picks. I'm trying to, I got a Scruggs book. Trishka was helping me, and I'm trying to just get the rolls down, right? And then so I put on Baseco Coyote, and I tried to play with it, and I couldn't play with it. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm black. I should be able to play with this. This is not acceptable, So that I just had to really struggle, and then there's some hammer on that happened, and then I could get all these. I got in the groove with it, and it changed, and that's when I wrote all that stuff that I call it Afrobilly, and it was like, wow, it just changed everything, and I just marveled at how I love how you went in there and found these musicians. I guess tell people the original banjo. I guess one of the names for it is Ngoni.
Well, yeah, that's the one that's in Mali, although I don't believe that there were slaves taken from Mali, but it's part of a family tradition, like it's part of a tradition, an instrument tradition of a certain shape and kind of instrument that is all over that part of Africa. And it's bigger in the Gambia, where they call it the akonting, but it's basically the same. There's one called the hallam, which is made with a snakeskin, X-A-L-L-A-U-M, I think, hallam, and they play almost sounds more Middle Eastern on strings that are so skinny, like fishing wire, but it almost has the string. It's not like a plastic string; it's more like wrapped thread, and it's so quiet. I don't know how anybody hears it, but the musician who's playing it. I could barely play. And they play with that same Ngoni technique with the fingernails, both directions, and they use the fingernails. So that's why they don't need picks. They use their nails. Someone like Baseco, who's, you know, he's still upset that I didn't name my children after him. He's a very funny guy. Have you met him?
Oh, I would love to meet him. His band
Oh,
is fabulous. Boy,
yeah.
he plays so good. So
He's
is it
raising up a
related?
family of kids that are playing the instrument too. Yeah.
Is it related to that claw hammer style, what they're doing, or is it different?
A little bit. I mean, I think the guys in Ngambia are a lot closer. Their hands like this, but it's similar. But I mean, the truth is, what Baseco does is just much more of a virtuoso kind of way of playing. So I mean, he can really jam out in a different way than most clawhammer players. Not that there aren't some, but the technique of clawhammer is a little harder to to improv freely with. I think
Yeah.
you're really in your tuning, So you can improv almost. I always tell when I run into a clawhammer player who asks me how to like expand, I say go listen to Indian music because they get in a rag and they're really still in one tonality. And if you've got a banjo tuned in an open C or something, then you can really use that drone, and you can really get do a lot of beautiful stuff that appears. I guess you don't really call it harmonic because it's not. There's no chords, but you can do things with the modes and the different. You can change it up quite a lot and do quite a lot with that. Where I don't know.
And they're writing, man. Baseco, the tunes they write,
Yeah.
the unison lines, it's almost, it's really deep stuff rhythmically and very beautiful. It was great to hear
Deceptive,
you
right?
play.
It's deceptive. His band stuff is deceptive. It seems like it's going to be no problem, and I've tried to play along with some of it too. And on tour with them, it took me a long time to kind of figure out how to find my way in, because it sounds like you ought to be able to jump in there, but it's not what you think. There's a lot of stuff under the hood that has got to be understood.
For sure.
I was wondering when you were talking about back, in Africa before strings were made in a store or before they were made. What were original strings comprised of?
Guts.
Animal
guts.
material?
Animal intestines, right?
Yeah, that's catgut. They used to say catgut strings. That's what they made fiddle strings out of too. Guts.
No kidding.
But then when fishing line, nylon fishing line came in, that's what the claw players used. That's what all the string players would use now, and they know the gauges, fishing line gauges. They cut them themselves and wrap them on.
I found that out from Rob D'Addario, because I've been with D'Addario strings since forever. I've been using them since I was 15, and I was at a NAMM show, and Rob D'Addario, I think he's like the grandson, and I said, so how did D'Addario start? He goes, well, back in the 1600s. I was like, what? So there's it was way back there, and they lived on an island. They were sheep farmers, and there was a famine, and all the sheep died. So their entire livelihood was, so they took all the sheep guts and made strings.
Wow.
And ended up making strings for all these orchestras. And
I'm always fascinated by the first person who discovered, who the hell realized a potato was edible, the first guy to eat a potato, how it looks like
and
a
not
rock.
die.
It's underwater, right?
Right.
But underground. So I'm thinking sheep guts, who looks at dead sheep and goes, we could make strings out of that. What an
I don't
odd
think they were
thing.
I don't think they were the first, but if you had sheep guts sitting there and they sat in the sun for a while, they probably become pretty
Tense.
Rubbery. Yeah.
Interesting.
You think, man, if
Damn.
I don't know.
It's so amazing to think about.
Once you get past the smell.
And I wanted to ask one more quick question, Bela. When you said panning on the album, when you're mixing and you're doing can you explain what that means when you're mixing and it's panning?
So stereo, you have a field that goes all the way to the right and left, and then there's a middle. And so you if you clump things in the middle, it presents real well, but things can get muddled. And with instruments that are all very similar sounding, to me, I remember when I was in Newgrass Revival, and we had this great producer named Garth Fundus, and I asked him about what he thought of my records. He said, "You're not using your pans. You're not using your pans. You've got all this field available to you. Why are you only using this?" And so, and I realized that when I was mixing bluegrass records, where I didn't want them to sound muddled, the deep instruments like the guitar and the dobro that had the lowest strings beside the bass, if I could pull them out further to the sides, all of a sudden there was room in the middle for the fiddle, the banjo, and the mandolin, which didn't compete as much. If you spread them out, you can perceive the mandolin's coming from here, the fiddle's coming from here, the bass and the banjo can both come from here because they're not dominating. They're not duplicating, and the rich instruments out to the sides, which a lot of people would still say that's not the way to mix bluegrass. The guitar should be next to the bass in the middle, and it makes a big dense thing. But with my music, where I want you to hear, one of my reasons was I was recording with Tony Rice, and here's the thing about Tony Rice, like his rhythm playing is so unbelievable, and you can't hear it on a lot of records. It disappears because it's in there in the middle. I was like, I'm going to be a record where you can hear what Tony Rice did, because every time we ever did a session with Tony Rice over the years, as soon as he would leave, we would turn on we would turn back the tape and mute everything but the guitar and just listen to his guitar tracks by themselves, and you could hear all this unbelievable rhythmic play, this cross picking, this use of the guitar, and we go, wow, it's so great, this album's going to be so great. The record would come out and you couldn't hear any of it. It would just get, so I was like, you're going to hear Tony Rice on my record.
Awesome.
And so I panned him all the way to the side and turned him up,
I
make sure
appreciate
it's
that,
like as
yeah.
loud as the middle. And
Thank you for explaining that.
Put
Yeah.
the dobro on the opposite side, and then the deep stuff was balancing each other, and there was room for the bass to be big in the middle and not get killed. And so people always told me, wow, that was a really different way to mix it. And so I did that on this record too. I split up the guitar and the dobro and made the middle open.
Oh, that's
and
so great.
had more room. And it was a lot harder when I had like 10 different people on it. I still had to find panning spots.
You need a bigger pan.
Yeah, I want more, but
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that, 'cause I was
And
thinking
you
about-
lose some lows, so it has to be something that can handle that. Or if something's too dark, push it out to the side; it gets clearer. If something's too bright, and it's thin, move it more toward the center, if possible. Those are all tricks that you learn as home studio.
Everybody came out of the pandemic with a master's degree in something, right? Didn't we hear that? Did John Mayer say that?
You know what's funny is I think a lot of people, and I try to tell this to my students a lot, just like to pay more attention to rhythm. And it's great that you make that available, because I'll never forget listening to, I think it was a Jimmy Smith record, and Kenny Burrell was playing guitar. And I ended up focusing on Kenny Burrell behind Jimmy Smith's solos instead of the solo. And what he was doing was like what you were talking about, Mike. It was so symphonic. Like it was orchestrated. There was, the way he played rhythm was just like a symphony, and it blew my mind. And I thought, a lot of the younger music, same with funk music, same, the rhythm thing is super important. And it's a shame to miss, because there's so much nuance and layers, and rhythmic, harmonic, everything, And I'm kind of surprised, actually. I guess I didn't know as much about Tony Rice as I thought. I didn't know he was catching that kind of hell from traditionalists.
Oh, Tony Rice? No, Tony Trischka was the one getting the hell from traditionalists.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, all right.
Tony Rice was pretty much he was God come down from heaven.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Okay, good. So I'm glad you cleared that up. I was like, man, they were giving Tony Rice hell.
No.
I thought he was God.
And even when he left the music and moved to California and started playing hippie music with David Grisman, they still loved him and thought he was the cat's pajamas. He somehow evaded, because he had a southern. Even though he was, I think, from California or Florida, he had a southern vibe, and he was clearly, he played with Crow, and there was no doubt about him,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got some of that too, because I feel like, to me anyway, there's no doubt about you, as far as, really, I could feel it. I could feel that you went down south and lived it. It's that nuance is something. I had the same elitist kind of thing. My musical snobbery, that my parents are New Yorkers. My dad's a big jazz head. He was into a lot of stuff, but the one thing that he wasn't really into was like old blues, like old country. And he had bluegrass records and country, but he didn't put it on the same level. Right. And so when I met Colonel Bruce and I started to play with bluegrass musicians and play with old blues musicians, I realized, like you said, like how much more was going on than I realized. Like the nuance was just mind-blowing. And now it kind of ruined some other music for me if it doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. It's strange. Like, I mean, I still love a lot of the stuff I loved before, but a lot of the stuff I loved before kind of fell by the wayside because of that, that dynamic, like just finding that, I don't know. He ruined my elitist thing.
Good.
But I feel
Yeah.
like you have that. I feel like you got all of that. You
I
got the
started
good.
there. I started there like because I wanted. By the time I got to where I was playing with Sam Bush and Tony Rice and Mark O'Connor and Edgar, like I was thinking I was pretty hot stuff, And but the
You
honest
were.
truth, the reason I was more elitist was because I discovered that when I didn't play with those guys, I didn't sound that good, and so I didn't want to
Ah,
go play in a pickup session with a bunch of guys and go jam and like not be able to play the way I could play when Sam Bush was. I mean, I have to say Sam
yeah,
Bush made me a better musician. I mean, standing next to him, he's a rock, and the two of us
yeah.
just turned into this rock together, Newgrass Revival. You couldn't
Sure
budge
did.
us,
Hmm.
and I thought my time was like I was like I've never lost the beat
Yeah,
in 9 years. I've never lost the beat, and it wasn't until I joined the Flecktones, and those guys are such amazing players too, and such supportive players. But all of a sudden, we were playing in these odd meters, and I didn't have Sam like showing me where the beat was all the time. I discovered, oh my God, I'm not. I thought they were wrong. I was me, and I discovered that I wasn't all I thought I was. But being with Abby, who comes from the old time world, is not the same elitist kind of thing. She's taught me a lot about things about myself that I don't like that much. I don't want to be
Yeah.
that person, but I think the part of me that wants to play really good and can only play a certain way when supported by certain people around me is just the truth. I
yeah,
can't do it without that same support at the level that I can with those other guys. And then you get addicted to playing at that level when you get there for a moment. You want
yeah.
it more. So that's
I'm
that's
glad
part
to
of it.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I've said that to people before. Like, it's really especially the drummer. Like the wrong drummer, I just can't. Like
Yeah,
I grew up playing with me and Kofi, just in my older brother in the
yeah.
music room, just the two of us, and his sense of time is so amazing. And I've told people I was like, man, you could hear me sound like crap if I'm not with the right guys because I feel like my hands don't work.
Exactly.
It's weird. It's like somebody put kryptonite in your cornflakes. And it's like,
Exactly.
wow, I can't play now. So I'm really relieved to hear you say that.
And the thing about Tony Rice is he all of a sudden my hands would do stuff it never had done before when I played with him. I could get that
Conversely,
first
yeah.
snap, and with Sam and Tony together, it was like, oh my God, this is it,
Wow.
Yeah.
um, and it will never be duplicated.
Bela,
No one's figured it out.
tell everybody where they could find this new album and everything that you're up to
Yeah,
at the moment.
well, the album's coming out, and I think it's either the 10th or the 12th of September.
Nice.
And up until then, I think we just put out one of the tracks with Billy Strings and Chris Thiele that people can find on various Bela social media platforms. And we also filmed this first concert that went so well that
Nice.
I'm sure we're going to put it up like before. And then we have a tour starting in September, assuming that COVID doesn't wipe us out again as this new Delta thing gathers steam. Then we'll be out there touring with the first band through September, and the second. Well, the first band is Sierra Hull, Michael Cleveland, Brian Sutton, Mark Schatz, Justin Moses, which has proved itself to be a killer band. I'm so excited about how everybody played on Sunday. But and then in December we're going out with Sam, all the other team,
Nice.
Sam Bush, Jerry Douglas, Stuart Duncan, Edgar, Brian, and myself. And then I've got a couple of amazing gigs. One in that the Ryman with everybody, including Billy and Chris, and
Oh,
also Carnegie Hall looks like is going to be happening for us too. A
Nice.
couple days later in January, and then after that we still haven't figured out what's going to happen, but looking for some summer touring, and this will be hopefully a part of what I do, for the foreseeable future.
beautiful.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. This is incredible.
Yeah, man. I feel like we could talk for 4 hours.
Will you come back and hang with us again?
Absolutely, I loved it. Always,
Awesome.
always loved. Great to meet you, and OTL. I love you. I'm
Yeah,
glad you're
man.
playing banjo. Got to hear it.
Yeah, I've
Get
had
him
to.
on the next album.
Well,
Yeah.
I've had to take more of a break from it than I would like because of my kids. They're
Yeah.
3 and 6, and they almost messed up one of my pitches. That's
Oh,
from 1936. I was like, ah, ah, ah. So,
so we both
but
have 3-year-olds.
I know, and
Yeah.
it really, it hit me hard when you said your son went through that because, um, I don't know, when I see stuff happen to kids now it hits me differently because I think of it happening to my kids.
Yeah.
My 3-year-old is a girl. Nigel is 6 now. But that's really heavy, man. I don't know how you get through that. Like you have a certain amount of PTSD after that, right? Like
Yeah, in fact, I remember like when a year hit, and it was the same time of year. Abby went into like a whole really dark place. She didn't even realize. And then we realized it was the same day. You know, we didn't even know it.
wow.
It was just so powerful. But no, he's great. You know, and then he's got a really good prognosis. You know, he's got something he'll have to deal with. But you know, everyone's got something. It's more like that than oh my God, we're gonna lose him, which we didn't. And but it got way closer than you want, and it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's life. I mean, you know, people live and die every day, but when it's your blood, it's a different thing. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can get our 3-year-olds together, and
Yeah,
that will be a really cool day when all variants are, you know.
What are you doing in terms of touring and things with the kids not vaccinated? How are you approaching it?
You know, we have our kids are not going to be allowed on the tour now. They're doing some. I don't know if I should even be telling this.
Yeah, should this be
podcast.
off? Should we say goodbye?
No, but it's. I mean, it's okay
It's
because I
gonna be
think everybody's going to find out soon. But yeah, we're doing a super lockdown because we have 42 dates.
Is this all of them?
No. This is Dead and Company.
Oh, Dead and Company, yeah.
Yeah, so we are. But you know, to me, like it all remains to be.
Is Allman's done? Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's okay. So it's kind of a remains to be seen thing. We don't, you know, I think some things are going to change. And I don't want to say what might change because I don't know.
Yeah.
I have an idea what might, but you know, it's very much just we're playing it by ear and we're seeing how it goes day to day. But I am looking forward to the day when our kids can be together. We both started having them older. So, you know, we have that in common too. So
How old are you, Oteil?
I'll be 57 in a few days.
Yeah.
On the
so
24th. When did you start? When did you have your first kid? How old were you?
I think I was, let's see, 54.
Oh, yeah. I was 50. So, yeah. You started.
I'm 63. And, well, Juno's 8, so it would have been maybe 55. 54,
Yeah.
50. Yeah.
I think
He's
it's
a
nice.
great kid. I'd love to meet your kids and get them together. That would be such
likewise. We'll do it, man. Well, thank you so much, man. This has been super great, and it's really great to see your face, and can't wait till we can see each other in person again soon.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Pleasure to meet you, and thank you again for saving my life at Bonnaroo.
I'm glad I can do it.
You have a great day, man.
See you soon.